You're probably familiar with the idea of the United States' government is based on the idea of a democracy. Well, what if I told you that some of those principles were actually founded in the Middle Ages? Well, today our question is, how did English kings of the Middle Ages create a foundation for democratic rule? Today, it's our goal to learn about England in the Middle Ages. And in order to do that, we want to break it down into some more manageable parts. First, we want to explain the effects of William the Conqueror's rule. Then we want to identify ways that English kings reformed England's government. And finally, we want to explain the influence of the Magna Carta. As we move through this lesson together, there are some vocabulary words that I want you to listen out for. First are your academic words, which are limited and census. And then your domain-specific words, words like Anglo-Saxon, Magna Carta, Parliament, and common law. Now remember that if you ever get stuck or need extra help with any of these words, you can always use your glossary. Our lesson question for this lesson is, how did English kings of the Middle Ages create a foundation for democratic rule? As we move through this lesson, we're going to take a look at several different kings. Kings like William the Conqueror and how he centralized government. Kings like Henry II and how they instituted legal reforms. And also some ineffective kings like King John and how his ineptitude led to the creation of the Magna Carta. This is a Bayeux tapestry, and what it shows is a scene from the Battle of Hastings that took place in 1066. This was a battle where William the Conqueror actually cast down King Harold right here. Now, this tapestry, what they would do is they would sew or embroider little vignettes of scenes onto these large tapestries. Now, I know that it looks pretty small right here, but this particular tapestry is actually 231 feet long. So if you had a lot of time and a very diligent sewing hand, then you could put a lot of historical information on one large tapestry. Here's our lesson question again. How did English kings of the Middle Ages create a foundation for democratic rule? Well, as we move forward in this lesson, let's start with how these kings were able to form a centralized government. Germanic people migrated to England after the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, they mostly came from two tribes, one called the Angles and one tribe called the Saxons, and this is where that term Anglo-Saxon originates from. The Angles, they came from the lower portion of Denmark up here, and the Saxons, they came from the coast of what we know as Germany over here. Now, William the Conqueror in 1066, he was one of three men who competed for the English throne. He was a duke from Normandy, and he would be known as William the Conqueror. William invaded, and he defeated his rivals in a battle known as the Battle of Hastings. So let's go to our map for a second. Here's Normandy, where William was from, and here is where they fought the Battle of Hastings here in England. Now, this is William the Conqueror here. He reigned from 1066 to 1087, and he united the kingdoms of England with much of modern-day France, and that's important to remember. England is where he conquered and what he took over, and France is his home country. He never learned how to read or write or how to speak English. He spoke French primarily, and that's all that he spoke throughout his reign. But he is attributed with bringing together England and France. Now, William made many changes after he assumed power. We talked about how he brought together England and France and how for a long time they worked together. However, later on, this was going to start causing some conflict between England and France. Also, what William did was he seized property and he gave it to Norman nobles. Remember that he came from Normandy. Also, he made all nobles swear allegiance to him, and he required French to be spoken at court, even though he was residing in what was known as England. Remember, he never learned English. He always spoke in French. Now, William created a centralized government. He introduced feudalism in England, which was, remember, where nobles would grant land to a vassal, and they would develop a manor system where they had lots of people that served them in exchange for protection. He created a council of nobles that would advise him in his rulings, and he appointed local officials called sheriffs, and it was their job to collect taxes. Now, let's draw a little pyramid here so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. So here is where William would be at the top, and then what he would do is he would grant land to one of his nobles, and they would have a manor system in which they would have the peasantry down here at the bottom. And then don't forget, these nobles would help to appoint these sheriffs. That it was their duty to collect taxes from the peasants and bring them back to the nobles. And then also, to collect the taxes accurately, William ordered that a census be taken. Remember that a census is to go through and count the heads of household and find out how much property they had. It was the first census conducted in Western Europe since the Roman times. It counted every manor. Remember, we did the pyramid that showed the manor system. It counted the heads of household and the farm animals. William was much more concerned with the wealth that was in the area. He wanted to know how much those sheriffs could collect in those taxes and bring back to him. He didn't count women or children. He wanted to count the heads of household and know how much wealth was in his kingdom so that he knew how much he could collect upon for himself. The results were published in a book or a record called the Domesday Book. Now, keep all of this in mind as we're talking or remembering our lesson question. Here is our lesson question once again. How did English kings of the Middle Ages create a foundation for democratic rule? Well, we just got done talking about William the Conqueror and how he was able to centralize government by introducing the feudal system, that pyramid that showed where the king sits at top and he has lots of people below him. Now we're going to talk about Henry II and how he was able to introduce legal reforms, some of which we still use in modern society today. It's time to talk about Henry II. Now, Henry II did a lot to unify England and France, especially when he married Eleanor of Aquitaine. This was William's grandson, William the Conqueror. Henry II, and he took the throne in the year 1100. He married Eleanor of Aquitaine, joining her family's lands in France to those that he already held in England. Here's Eleanor of Aquitaine, and she was a very interesting character in history. She's regarded as one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. She was a duchess in France in her own right, and that means that she controlled land. She had her own lands in France. And so she didn't really understand that when she came to England to be the wife of Henry II, that she wasn't entitled to so much power as she thought she should be. She participated in the Crusades, and she was known for her patronage of the arts. If you take a look at this picture here of Eleanor, there's Eleanor sitting on the throne right there. You can see examples of her patronage. You can see that there is a musician playing for her right here. You can see this gentleman with the hammer, this craftsman here. And you can see her looking down approvingly at all these craftsmen and supporting them. Now, remember when I said that she was a duchess in her own right and didn't really transition to her role very well? Well, she tried to overthrow King Henry II by using her two sons. But that coup was broken up. She was found out, and she was actually imprisoned for 15 years. Now, Henry II, he instituted a lot of legal reforms, and some of these legal reforms still stand true in our society today. Let's take a look. Royal judges traveled around kingdoms to settle disputes and to punish crimes. Remember this word right here, that the judges were the ones who settled disputes and they doled out the punishments. That is equal in our society today. A use of a jury trial was introduced where they would use 12 educated men or 12 lawful men to sit and listen to these disputes being settled. We still do that today. We have in jury trials, we have 12 people listen to the trial. A system of uniform punishments was established, where if you committed an equal crime, you got the same punishment for that crime. And also the rulings of judges were used to establish a system of common law. Now these common laws, they were established on precedent. And what that means is the rulings of judges. If there was a previous ruling on the same subject, let's say that there was a land dispute, but maybe a few months ago there was a similar case that this judge or another judge had heard involving the same type of situation, and that had already been ruled upon. Well, judges would look at those previous rulings to decide the current case, and that's what precedent is, and it established common law. Our lesson question is, how did English kings of the Middle Ages create a foundation for democratic rule? Well, we're really on our way to answering that question. We've spoken about William the Conqueror and how he was able to centralize government. We've spoken about Henry II and how he implemented legal reforms, some of which are still used in modern-day U.S. society now. Now we're also going to talk about a less popular king, King John, and how his rule made other nobles insist that he sign a document called the Magna Carta. Remember when I told you that Eleanor of Aquitaine had 2 sons, and she was always trying to use them or manipulate them into taking over the throne over Henry II? Well, her 2 sons, their names were Richard and John, and eventually, after Henry II died, Richard and John would have the opportunity to take over control. But there gets to be a little bit of twisting around in this story, so follow me for a second. Eleanor continued to influence the monarchy through her sons. Now, Richard I, he was known as Richard the Lion-Hearted. He was a hero in the Crusades, but he had a younger brother named John. And John would rule in his absence until he would assume the throne in 1199. Now, what actually happened, let's take a look at this picture right here. And I want you to go back in your mind, and if you can recall the story of Robin Hood, this is the monarchy that was going on during that story. Remember that in the story of Robin Hood, Richard the Lion-Hearted was off fighting the Crusades, and evil King John took over, and Robin Hood came in to steal from the rich and give to the poor. Now, Richard I, he died in the Crusades, and when he was away fighting, John, his younger brother, was sitting on the throne, ruling in his absence. But Richard the Lion-Hearted, he already had a son. He had an heir to the throne who should have taken over when Richard died in the Crusades. However, remember Eleanor of Aquitaine, she's always sort of manipulating things. She found a way for younger brother John to actually assume that throne in 1199 after Richard died. Now, King John's reign, he was very unpopular. He taxed his people heavily to pay for the wars with France. He lost Normandy and other valuable lands when his troops were defeated. He taxed the church in England, which a lot of people found fault with. And he abused his power as king by taking away rights of the nobility. He was very unpopular. And what this unpopularity did was it actually opened a way for the Parliament to get some more power and to force him to sign a document called the Magna Carta. In 1215, a group of English nobles forced John to sign the Magna Carta. This was a document that would limit the power of the monarchy. It would take power away from King John. It said that the king could not interfere with the church. No one was to be imprisoned without legal cause. The king couldn't collect or raise taxes without consent of his council. The king could not take away somebody else's lands without legal cause or compensation, and that free men would have a right to a jury trial. The important thing that I want you to remember here as we've gone through these points is that they might sound familiar to you. That's because the Magna Carta actually helped to influence the United States Constitution so many years later. If you take a look at some of these points that we've outlined, things like no taxation without representation, the right to a jury or due process, and the right for religious freedoms. These are ideas that came from the Magna Carta, but are also important today when we look at the Constitution. Let's talk very briefly about the evolution of Parliament, which is the governing body in England that still exists today. It started with the Great Council, which was a group of noblemen, knights, and clergies who would come together and help advise the king. Now that progressed to the Model Parliament, which was conducted by a group of representatives of the nobility and the clergy, and then it also included some knights or the middle class, and rest to Parliament as we know it more in its modern day form. And now it's divided into two houses. One is the House of Lords, which is comprised of nobles and clergy, and then also the House of Commons, which includes people like knights and burgesses or members of that middle class. Now what Parliament does is it, much like the Magna Carta, helps to create a center of checks and balances for the monarchy, especially when it has to do with taxation. When we put things on a timeline, it's easier for us to recall the order of events. Remember that we started out with William the Conqueror and him unifying England and France and forming that alliance and bringing them together. And then we can see Henry II during his rule and remember all the legal reforms that he created. And then we ended with King John when he was forced to sign the Magna Carta for his ineptitude as a ruler. After King John, we can see how the monarchy sort of fell away and we have Parliament taking over. But don't forget that when you put things on a timeline, it's easy to forget that there's also a lot of other things going on in history at this time. In this case, the Crusades were starting, and then we would end with the 100 Years' War.